Hi, welcome to our online class devoted to evaluating writing assessments and strategies and support for assessment for English language learners. We're going to start out taking a look at a writing assessment. You will remember this form from earlier assessments that we used for oral language. We're going to continue to use this tool as we think through students' content understandings and language understandings with both their strengths and next steps. The student's writing that we are looking at this evening is an 8th grade student from a K-8 school in Aurora. This student is 14 years old and they have been in the country approximately 18 months to 2 years. They are a refugee student. The type of interaction used for this assessment was a written response to a reading. The language functions the student was asked to operate in were cause and effect and proposition and support. We'll talk a little bit more about what the response required in just a few moments. The tools that were used to evaluate this assessment were grade-level reading performance indicators aligned with content standards and the WIDA writing rubric. Before getting into the actual writing assessment, it is important in this case that we understand the story synopsis of the narrative piece that the student was responding to in writing. Take a moment and read this brief synopsis of the text that the student was reading and responding to. If you need to pause this screencast to do so, go ahead and do that now. The educational purpose of this exercise was to work towards identifying the author's purpose in fiction. Students looked at the events and characters through a qualitative lens in an attempt to identify Vonnegut's purpose as responding to a cultural obsession with fairness and equality. Students were to pull out those two key themes in the text. In this text, Vonnegut attempts to expose the consequences via reductio ad absurdum, which means taking viewpoints to absurd conclusions. As you reflect back on the synopsis, this is a very complex text, and students are being asked to both catch on to the sarcasm that Vonnegut uses and to carry the theme through the use of that. Let's take a moment to read the student's writing and to look at what the teacher prompted the student to do. In the first prompt, the student is asked to write a summary of the story. This child was intentionally not given any support to see what he was able to accomplish on his own. He wrote, "The boy was smart, and he went jail. And her voice, a warm, luminous, timeless melody. And he said, 'Excuse me.' Then her voice was bad. He went jail because he was smart." Then the teacher asked to write why you think the author wrote this. The student responded, "We should don't kill people because in the story the boy was in jail." Let's think about this piece of writing first through the lens of the student's content understandings, both their strengths and next steps. In this first section, the student shows that they have some understanding of causation with a very difficult concept. You might not think on the surface that a smart person would go to jail, but the student has to understand that he did go to jail because he did not have a disability before the government had taken him. In this section here, the student attempts to take word for word from the text some key pieces in an attempt to justify his conclusions. And in the final section, he shows you that he is beginning to understand theme, that you shouldn't kill people. That is taking it one step. We know that the main theme of the text, however, is fairness and equality. So next steps for the student would be to use some more examples from the text to justify understanding, and to possibly be able to put those examples in his own words. Another next step for content would be to deepen his inferential understanding about both the purpose and the theme of the text. So as we move back to the evaluation and assessment tool, Graphic Organizer, some of the items this teacher wrote down under content understandings was that B demonstrated basic understanding of the narrative text. His response showed his recognition of causation, when he stated he was in jail because he was smart. He shows beginning understandings of a theme that you shouldn't kill. And he uses some text to approximate justifying his conclusions. Some next steps for his content understanding are to work on using more examples from the text for his written reading responses. He also misunderstood the text by using the text just only as a starting point. He needed to pick other key pieces to elaborate better. He needs to deepen his inferential understanding around themes or purposes in text. Now that we have looked at the student's content understandings, we're going to start to think about what language the student is able to hold on to and what he needs to do next. We're going to first look at linguistic complexity or discourse complexity. We'll notice that the first sentence is just about a compound sentence. Although the student leaves out to, the word to, he is able to join two simple clauses with the conjunction and. Another example of a compound sentence is at the bottom. We should not kill people or don't kill people because in the story, the boy was in jail. Again, there is some issue with the negative tense. However, the construction of this sentence does make it compound. Another compound sentence is here. He went to jail because he was smart. Here we have an example of a simple sentence when he takes word for word from the text to describe the woman's voice. Some next steps around linguistic complexity for the student would be that some cohesion is lacking. As I look on the writing rubric, this is a piece that is developed in the expanding stage. He is also missing small words, like to, throughout the text. This seems to put him in the developing stage. He is using simple and expanded sentences, in this example compound sentences, to show emerging complexity and detail. As I turn back to my tool, I record this under the linguistic complexity column. I record the language level first, developing. The student uses simple and expanded sentences. He regularly uses compound sentences to show causation. He went jail because he was smart. A next step for this student would be to work on using cohesion to provide detail and clarity. This statement is taken right from the expanding column on the WIDA writing rubric. His writing currently lacks complete development, and this would also be a piece to support him with. Now that we've looked at linguistic complexity, let's move on to vocabulary usage. When he uses the word smart, he is using specific vocabulary. However, the word bad is more general. The word jail, more specific. And a next step for the student around vocabulary would be to use more specific and technical words. In the text, it calls Harrison athletic and genius. These would be great specific words that he would be able to use in this section here. Another next step around vocabulary would be vocabulary for themes. Things like obsession, equality, fairness, all of which are key pieces of this text. As I take a look at the WIDA writing rubric, I see that the student is using general and some specific language related to the content area, but lack of needed vocabulary is evident. As I look at vocabulary usage on the evaluation tool, I make note that the student falls within the developing level and give us examples of specific language that he uses. When thinking about next steps, I note the needed specific vocabulary that he needs to continue to build around character descriptions and themes in text by giving specific examples from this particular piece. After thinking through vocabulary usage, we can move on to language control. Take a moment to reflect on the language control the student has in this piece. In the first section, it is generally comprehensible. However, meaning is somewhat impeded with the causation of details. He states that you should not kill people because in the story the boy was in jail. Although this statement is somewhat true, It is difficult for him with his language to get to the heart of what the theme of this story is. So, some next steps for the student would be to support them with cohesion with the use of grammar and punctuation. There are quite a few run-on sentences, and these ideas would enable him to have more fluency with his piece of writing. Another next step would be functional language for summary and cause and effect. We know that there are predictable language patterns for both of these functions of language, and as he develops this language, it would definitely make the writing more organized. Finally, we want him to decrease the need to circumlocute. The functional language for summary and cause and effect would indeed help him do this. You can see the evidence of his circumlocution when he states almost 3 times, "The boy was smart and he went to jail." You can tell that he knows that this is a key part of the text, but he lacks the language needed at this point to convey what he really does understand. I would place him at a level 2 on the rubric. When using simple discourse, it is generally comprehensible, but meaning may be impeded by groping for language structures. I've already noted on my annotated piece the evidence that shows me that this is what his language is sounding like. I note on the tool that he is beginning, and I pull right from the rubric those reasons why. Generally comprehensible, understandable, but meaning is impeded when he tries to explain something further. I also discuss next steps for the student around cohesion, fluency, and organization. Please go to the screencast part 2 to hear about the synthesis for the student's learning and supports that will help him move forward.